Hello, happy What the Heck Wednesday. I'm excited to talk to you today, guys. This is going to be great. We are going to talk about habits and how they work. And this is going to be huge for you to be but to really be able to understand what is going on in your life and why you do the things that you do. So let's talk a little bit about how habits work. So first of all, the difficult thing about really studying the science of habits is that most people, when they hear about this field of research, they want to know like some secret formula for like quickly changing any habit. And if scientists had like discovered this already and how these patterns work, then it stands to reason that like all of us would have a recipe for rapid change already, right? If it was only that easy, because it's really not that formulas don't exist. The problem is that there isn't just one formula for changing habits. There are thousands because we're all individuals, right? And individuals and habits are all different. And so the specifics of diagnosing and changing the patterns in our lives differ from person to person and from behavior to behavior. Everything is so like beautifully unique. Like giving up cigarettes is different than curbing overeating, which is different from changing how you communicate with your spouse or your significant other, which is completely different from how you prioritize tasks at work. And each person's habits are also driven by different cravings. There's so many different kind of levers that are pulled to create these habits with us that they're absolutely, positively, completely unique. So today I want to talk to you about a framework for understanding how habits work and a guide for you so that you can experiment with how they might change. And when you work with me as a coach one on one, or eventually when I do group coaching, I am huge on experimenting and using your own body and your own mind as a laboratory for change. So, some habits are going to yield easily for you and be able to change fairly quickly, while others may be more complex, more stubborn, and are going to require some real deep digging to really find the places where you can make change with them. And change may not be fast. I'm just going to tell you that flat out. Change may not be fast. Sometimes it can be, but sometimes change isn't going to happen fast, isn't going to happen quickly. And sometimes it's really not that easy, because if it was easy, right, we would already have changed those habits, and those habits wouldn't still be, smacking us upside the head every other day when we really, really, truly crave change. But with time and effort, almost every habit can be reshaped. So feel good about that and know that it is an absolute possibility for you. So let's talk about the framework for changing habits. There's essentially 4 steps. So being able to identify your habit or the routine you go through for your habit, being able to experiment with rewards, understanding the cues and isolating them, and then having a plan, a go forward plan once you've done those first 3. So let's talk about step 1, which is identifying the routine. So at MIT, there were researchers that discovered a simple neurological loop that's at the core of every habit. And that loop consists of 3 parts. And I kind of just told you all about it. It's the cue, it's the routine, and it's the reward. That's a habit loop. And I'm going to teach you how to use it to your greatest good. And you have tons of these going on with you right now, but I'm going to show you how to reshape those. So like to understand your own habits, you really need to identify the components of your loop. So think about some habits that you have going on right now with your diet, with your exercise, what you do that works for you and what you do that may not work for you. Okay. And once we've like kind of diagnosed or figured out those habit loops of particular behaviors, then we can look for ways to kind of change old vices with new routines. And that's exciting. So let's take, for example, you have a bad habit of like going to I'm going to use Starbucks, but going to Starbucks at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, right? And you're buying like this, I don't know, caramel frappuccino, a couple extra palms, some nice whipped cream on that, some caramel drizzle on top, right? Sounds delicious, but it's not the best for you. You got to admit that, right? And say this habit has over time, maybe even through quarantine, has caused you to put on a few pounds. And, maybe people have said something that's, kind of embarrassing, a spouse or something. They're always up for that. Or a child. A child is always up for letting you know that you're not looking as fit as you used to. Or you just noticed it yourself and you feel like really rugged and terrible about it, right? And you've tried to force yourself to stop going to Starbucks so often or changing up, maybe changing up your order, right? You even put like Post-its on your computer, at your desk saying no more Starbucks. Like, don't do this. This is not your goal, or your goal is something else, right? But every afternoon between like 2 and 3 o'clock, you manage to ignore that note, get up and find your way, over to Starbucks to get that caramel frap with the extra drizzle of caramel on top. But while you're doing it, are hanging out and you're kind of talking with the people that are there at the cash register at Starbucks, or maybe your friend, kind of meets up with you too for like this little afternoon get together, which is kind of nice, a little social interaction, right? But getting that Starbucks, feels really good. And then it feels really bad, kind of that, buyer's remorse when it comes to, eating things that you may not necessarily consciously want to eat all the time. And tomorrow you promise yourself, like, you're going to muster that willpower. I'm going to use all my willpower to resist it. And tomorrow is going to be different. But then tomorrow comes along and that habit takes hold again. And you find yourself back in line getting that Starbucks, right? So, how do you start diagnosing and then changing this behavior for your own good? Well, by figuring out the habit loop that's triggering this, right? And the first step is to identify the routine. So, in this scenario, as with most habits, the routine is like the most obvious piece of all of this. It's the behavior you want to change. And your routine is that you get up from your desk in the afternoon, you go to Starbucks. I was going to call it Carbucks. You go to Starbucks, you get your Frappuccino, and you drink it while chatting with, your friends, or maybe you're, on social media or whatever. So that's what you put in the loop. That is your loop effectively, right? So let's ask some like less obvious questions to this loop. Like, what's the cue for this loop, this little habit loop, this little habit routine? Are you, I don't know, are you hungry and you go get a nice fat coffee hit? Are you bored? Are you low on blood sugar? Are you just, hitting a slump at the end of the day and you need a coffee fix? Is it that you just, need a break before jumping into the next round of meetings or whatever, you're working on at work? And then what's the reward that you're getting out of it? Is it the coffee itself? Is it just a change of scenery? Is it a temporary distraction? Is it being able to go out and socialize a little bit, even with your mask on? Just being able to hang out with human beings? Or is it just the burst of energy that comes from, having that blast of caffeine and the blast of sugar? So to figure this all out, this is where the experimentation comes in. So step 2 is we're going to experiment with rewards. So rewards are really, really powerful. We're kind of like, you ever heard of Pavlov's dog, the one that drooled anytime, he knew he was going to be fed, which is like a classic psych experiment? Well, we're kind of like that. And rewards are powerful for us because they satisfy cravings. And we're often not really conscious of these cravings that drive our behaviors. Otherwise, these habits wouldn't continually be hindering us, right? So, to figure out which cravings are driving particular habits, it's really useful to start experimenting with different rewards. And this might take a few days, a week, longer. It depends on what kind of habit you're really trying to kind of redesign or break. And during that period, don't feel any pressure to make real change. Just kind of naturally flow with it, naturally go with it, and kind of think of yourself as like maybe a scientist in like this like data collection stage to see what happens when you change this one variable, right? So on the first day of your experiment, you could, when you feel the urge to, go to Starbucks and get your coffee, you could adjust your routine so that it leads you to a different reward. So it might be instead you go outside if it's a beautiful day and take a walk around the block. Like that's totally a different reward that will be satisfying, but it's going to be different because it's not coffee based or food based, right? So you're going out and you're taking a walk around the block, and then you go back to your desk without getting your coffee or drinking anything. And it'll energize you to do a lot of things, but just kind of switch that up to see if a non drink, non food oriented reward might be just as compelling for you. And then the day after that, maybe go somewhere else and I don't know, I mean, this is awful, but like go get a donut, right? Or eat a candy bar. Like if it's something that's food related that, you're just looking for some energy or something like that, and eat that at your desk. And maybe the next day when that, craving hits, that 2, 3 o'clock craving hits, you get up and you go buy an apple or you get a salad or you have something healthy as a snack. You see how I'm trying to do different things here? Um, and then the next day, maybe you go make yourself a regular cup of coffee, and maybe with some, nice unsweetened or like stevia sweetened sweetener or something like that, right? So try different things as the reward to kind of fill that in and see what things start to satisfy you. And maybe another day it would be just because you have that social aspect, right? You pick up the phone or you FaceTime a friend, right? So try some different things, some that are food related, some that are exercise related, some that are change of scenery related, some that might be social related, and see which rewards feel good and take note of that. So you kind of get the idea where I'm going here, right? What you choose to do instead of getting that coffee, that frappuccino, just it's not important. The point is just to test out different hypotheses or different things to determine which craving is really driving your routine. You're craving something. Like is it sweet? Is it caffeine? Is it just a change of scenery? Is it socialization? Like what is that thing that you're actually craving? Trying to isolate and identify that. And just try that and test it out, right? Are you hungry? Are you bored? All those things, and you'll start to weed out what actually is going on in your brain that's leading you down the route to go get the Starbucks. Okay. So as you start to test all these different rewards, start to look for patterns. Jot down on a piece of paper if you have a journal or post-it notes. I love post-it notes, or I have cards. I have index cards everywhere, like jot down on index cards. The first three things that come to mind when you get back to your desk, and they could be anything, right? Just what's going on in your head, random emotions, thoughts, reflections on how you're feeling, or just the first three words that pop into your head, and just jot those down. And then set an alarm and watch your computer for 15 minutes. And when the alarm goes off, ask yourself, do you still feel the urge for that coffee? So you've done something else. After 15 minutes, you're back at your desk. Do you still feel the urge for that cookie? And the reason why this part is important and important to write down these three things, even if they feel completely meaningless to you, is, first of all, it is this momentary awareness, which is when you're trying to be mindful about things, about what you're thinking or what you're feeling. And that's really important to this habit loop. So writing these three words is just this moment of attention on what's going on in your mind, consciously, subconsciously, when you're having this craving or after you've tried to satisfy the craving, whatever that craving may be, that's leading you to coffee, and what's going on in your head. And then, like, when you journal things like this, studies have shown that writing down just a few words is actually going to help you recall. It has to do with writing it down. So like pencil, pen, paper, write it down helps you later recall what you're thinking in that moment. And at the end of the experiment, when you review your notes, it's going to be much easier for you to remember what you were thinking and feeling at that precise instant because you scribbled down a few words on a piece of paper. And it's going to trigger a wave of recollection, which is really cool. When you type things in your phone or do like voice messages, memos, and stuff like that, it just like, for me at least, it's just like vaporizes from my brain. But when you write things down on notes, it sticks a little bit better. And the 15-minute alarm, the point of that test is really to determine the rewards you're craving. And in that 15 minutes after you took the walk or, got a donut or something or a candy bar, after you still feel that urge after 15 minutes, after going and doing that, then your habit probably isn't motivated by like the candy bar, a sugar craving, or the going out and taking a walk, a change of scenery. That it's not the thing that's triggering your craving for that coffee. Does that make sense? It's really kind of crazy, but it's really kind of cool. So by experimenting with these different rewards, you're going to be able to really isolate what you're actually craving. And this is essential in redesigning your habit and hacking your habit. This is what we're here for. We're here to hack things, right? Okay, so step 3 is to isolate your cue. And this one's fun. I've done so much with this. So about a decade ago, there was a psychologist at the University of Western Ontario, and they tried to answer a question that had like bewildered social scientists for years. And the question was, why do eyewitnesses of crimes, I love this, misremember what they see while others recall events accurately? I have been one of those people that totally couldn't remember anything. But the recollections of these eyewitnesses was, obviously incredibly important, but the studies indicated that the eyewitnesses often misremembered what they observed, and they insist that the thief was like a man when the thief was actually like wearing a skirt or had long hair or something like that. And dozens of studies have been examined with this phenomenon. It's actually a phenomenon with human beings, and trying to determine why some people are better eyewitnesses than others. And researchers have theorized tons of things, like that some people simply have better memories, or that a crime occurs in a familiar place that's easier to recall. But those theories really didn't test out. And people with strong or weak memories, or more or less familiarity with the scene of the crime, were equally liable to misremember what took place. So the psychologist at the University of Western Ontario took a totally different approach. And she wondered if researchers were actually making a mistake by focusing on what questioners and witnesses had said rather than how they were saying it. And she suspected that there were subtle cues that were influencing the questioning process. But when she watched videotape after videotape after videotape of these witness interviews, looking for cues, she really didn't see anything. And there was so much activity in each interview, like facial expressions and the different ways questions were posed and fluctuating emotions, that she couldn't really detect any patterns. So she came up with this idea. She made a list of a few elements that she would focus on, like the questioner's tone, the facial expressions of the witnesses, how close the witness and the questioner were sitting, next to each other. And then she removed any information that would distract her from those elements. And she turned down the volume on the TV. So instead of hearing the words, all she could detect was the tone of the questioner's voice. And she taped a piece of paper over the questioner's face, like all these different variables she was removing. So all she could see was the witnesses' expressions. And she held a tape measure to the screen to measure their distance from each other. And when she started these specific experiments, patterns started to leap out, kind of like we're doing here. We're trying to identify patterns that we have with ourselves. And she saw that witnesses had misinterpreted facts. The ones that misinterpreted them usually were questioned by cops who used like this gentle, friendly tone. So the good cop tone, right? And when witnesses smiled more or sat closer to the person asking the questions, they were more likely to misremember pieces of the crime scene. Isn't that crazy? So, in other words, when environmental cues say that we're friends, right? A gentle tone, a smiling face, witnesses were more likely to misremember what had occurred. Perhaps it was because subconsciously those friendship cues triggered a habit to please the questioner, right? You'd rather please a friend if the questioner was a little more gruff. Maybe they would have remembered more because they really didn't want to please them so much because they were a jerk. Isn't it crazy? Like crazy thinking about that, but you can see how that might happen, right? But the importance of this experiment is that those same tapes have been watched by dozens of other researchers, and lots of smart people had seen the same patterns, but no one had recognized them before because there was too much information. There was too much noise in each of these tapes to see the subtle cue. So once the psychologist decided to focus on only three categories of behaviors, however, to eliminate all the noise, all the extraneous information, all these patterns started to leap out. And that's what we're doing here. We're only focusing on a few things, the cue, the routine, and the reward, so that we can see the patterns that leap out rather than all the other white noise that's in there. And our lives are the same way. And the reason why it's so hard to identify the cues that trigger our habits is because there's too much stuff going on, way too much stuff, too much information bombarding us as our behaviors unfold in front of us. Like ask yourself, do you eat breakfast at a certain time each day? Is it because you're hungry? Or is it because the clock says it's 7:30 and this is when I always eat breakfast, regardless of whether I'm hungry or not? My stomach is going to growl, I swear to you, the minute I mentioned hungry. Or is it because like your kids have already started eating, so if somebody else is eating, I'm going to eat too? Or because you're dressed and it's just like I get up, I brush my teeth, I get dressed, I eat breakfast, and that's when the breakfast habit kicks in. Like breakfast is a habit. Like think about that. Think about the things that you go through that identify for yourself that now it is time to eat. Whether you're hungry or not, you've gone through the steps and now it is time to eat. You've queued yourself up and now we're going to go through the eating breakfast routine. Crazy, huh? So when you automatically turn, like when you're driving and you automatically turn your car left while driving to work, because we've done this before, what triggers that behavior? Is it a sign? Is it a tree? Is it, a gas station? Like the knowledge that this is in fact like the correct route that you're going on, like all of them together. Now think about this. Say you're driving your kid to school and you find that you've absentmindedly started taking the route to work. Have you ever done that? Like you're going one way, but the next thing you know, like I did that with a carload of people. I had my kids there, my entire family, my parents were in the back seat one day, and we were going to go eat at a restaurant like PF Chang's or something. And PF Chang's was over this bridge, over the highway. But it was the same way I took to work. And next thing you know, I'm getting on the highway and I'm going to work. And everybody's like, where are we going? I was like, I guess we're going to work because I was taking the same path. And I just let my subconscious drive me there. And that habit loop took over. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like it's crazy, but it's true. So to identify one of your cues amid all the noise, we can use the same system as the psychologist did. So we're going to identify categories of behaviors ahead of time to scrutinize those patterns so that we can see them, right? And luckily, science offers us some help with this. So think about it. Experiments have shown that almost all habitual cues fit in one of five categories. So we can really kind of like tone this down. Location, time, emotional state, other people like your social circle, and whatever the immediately preceding action was. So if you're trying to figure out that cue for going to get the Starbucks habit, right? You write down five things that happen in the moment the urge hits, right? Where are you when that urge hits? I'm sitting at my desk. What time is it? It's about 3:00. What's your emotional state? I'm bored. I'm tired of doing what I'm doing here at work. Who else is around? Nobody. And what action preceded the urge? Nothing. I was just sitting there working, right? So for me, boredom. will kind of rise to the top as my emotional state, and my emotional state may be driving this urge to get up, go do something else, and go get the coffee, and the coffee's the next thing. Do that same thing the next day and the day after that, whenever that urge hits, and write down where you're at, what's the time, what's your emotional state, is there anybody else around, and what action preceded that urge, and see if you can determine any kind of patterns that are popping out for you. And then you can hop on to step 4. So once you figured out that habit loop, you've identified the reward driving your behavior, the cue triggering it, and the routine itself, right? You can begin to shift the behavior. You can change to a better routine by planning for the cue. Like, this cue's happening, so you have a plan in place to counter that, and then choose a behavior that delivers the reward you are craving. And you just need to really focus on that plan. A habit is really a choice that we deliberately make at some point and then stop thinking about it. So at one point we had to think about it, and then it just became something we continually did. And then it became something running on autopilot in the back of our mind, right? So it's kind of like a formula. Your brain automatically follows. When I see this cue, I will do this routine, and then I will get this reward. It's really crazy to think that we're kind of at the mercy of these habits, but we can change them, which is super cool. So to re-engineer that formula, we need to begin making choices again and stop running on autopilot. When I see, the easiest thing to do is, to have that plan. To have that plan when you know that cue is going to happen. So here's one thing that I did years and years and years ago is I wanted to exercise more. And what I was doing when I would come home, I would change my clothes. It would be a hard day at work. I would have a glass of wine, and then I would sit on the couch. It's not going to work if I want to exercise. That's not going to work if I want to keep weight off, right? So I determined what was going on here. So my cue to sit on the couch was to have the glass of wine. My cue for that glass of wine was the minute I got home and I changed to my clothes. So I changed things up. So what I did is I slid in a different routine. So I came home, cue, changed my clothes, drank a glass of pre-workout, and then I worked out. So I got a different reward. I got endorphins is what I got. I got endorphins and serotonin, some good stuff from working out. So I changed. I still came home. That was my cue. Go home, change my clothes. But instead of drinking the glass of wine, I drank a glass of pre-workout. When you drink a glass of pre-workout, there's nothing else you can do. You don't drink pre-workout for fun just to drink it. You drink it because you have a specific task in mind. So it was a great way to change my routine, leveraging the cue that I already had, me coming home and changing my clothes. You see how that works? See how you can do that, right? It may not work immediately. Sometimes it does, and it's killer, but just keep swimming. Eventually, it's going to start to become automatic. So and you're going to feel amazing, and you're going to feel accomplished, and you're going to feel like you really did something, and then you can move on to the next habit. So my request for you is to take action. And we talked about this last week. If you don't take action, everything that you've done here or listened to it never comes to fruition. It's all about action. Information is great, but without action, it's nothing. So take action right now. So think of a habit that you want to break. Post in about it, talk to me about it, DM me about it if it's really, really super personal. And let's use this framework to figure out something new, and I'll help you with it. I will absolutely help you with it. So, ping me and let's work on it. So think of a habit you want to break. I want you to identify the routine. I want you to experiment with rewards. I want you to isolate the cue and then determine a plan to change it. So that's it. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you really enjoyed this. I love coming here and talking to you about all these crazy things. Like, losing weight is so much more than a diet. Diets suck. Throw them out the window. They're short-term fixes. What I want to do with you guys here is to help you create long-term wins that will take you long, long, long into the future, so that you can have healthy, happy life and be able to live a life you love in a body you love. So Hope this was helpful. Take action, definitely take action. Reach out to me. I'd love to help you with this, and we'll work on those new habit loops. So until next week, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you next Wednesday. Take care, and I will see you soon. Bye.